this video, I want to talk about cyclic living, which is something I'm really passionate about. And part of this video is going to be a clip from my larger 2.5-hour workshop that I have about cyclic living. We'll show kind of about why we can use nature as our guide and a little bit more about what cyclic living is. But I wanted to kind of introduce it here and explain a little bit about why it's so important to me. So for those who don't know me, I have been a nurse for over 11 years and I worked as a nurse practitioner for about 2.5. And in a very big nutshell, I got an extreme case of burnout back in 2023, which led me to leave my job and as a nurse practitioner, and kind of have done a lot of work since then to kind of heal from that. And throughout this whole process, I looked back on my life and looked at what has made me unwell kind of up until that point. And a big piece of it was related to the fact that I was entrenched and living in hustle culture to the point where I valued my worth as being equal and related to my productivity. And I bet even if you haven't maybe stated that, the way that you live your life may be aligned with feeling a belief underneath that your value is equal to your productivity and your worth is equal to your productivity. So how would you know if that was the case, right? This is when we are constantly feeling the need to check off things on a list, to get enough done, to do it all, right? To never need to rest or say no or set boundaries, like to feel like if I'm a capable person, I can do all of these things. And if I can't, I'm somehow less than. It's really prioritizing the actions we take and the things we accomplish and all the stuff we can say we checked off a list versus valuing rest and boundaries and saying no. And I was very much on this ladder of, school and going to a good school and then like going to a better school and like furthering my degrees and getting a dream job, right? Like doing this thing on this ladder that we feel we need to or should be doing, which really led me to a state of just very much disconnection from my body, which I also think is very common in our common culture right now. Most of us live in our minds where our thoughts are ruling the world, whereas our bodies are seen as just like this thing that is kind of connected to our head and like kind of follows us along in our life. We're not really tuned into our intuition, to our inner knowing, to our body's signals, right? We override them, right? How many times did I override, I have to pee, but I have more patients I need to see, so I'm just going to hold it. Or, oh, I've worked 12 hours on a labor and delivery shift and I haven't peed at all, but I also haven't drank anything because I didn't have any time. And that's like, okay. Or you're sitting at the computer for hours at a time and like don't get up because there's just like too much to get done. It's just like overriding like the chest tightness and the anxiety and the stress that you're feeling of saying, well, I'll just double down and go harder to try to overcome this stress and just get more done because that'll probably help, versus pausing to tune in and saying like, what is going on in my body? Like, what is it needing? What is it saying? What am I feeling? And can I honor that? And knowing that your body is trying to keep you safe all the time, safe and secure. And so if we can tune in and listen to our bodies and honor it, the world would feel very different. The way you live your life would feel very different. So all of that is to say, throughout my healing journey, I have embraced what I call cyclic living. And there's probably a lot of different definitions of people who do cyclic living or some form of that out there. But to me, cyclic living is living my life according to a rhythm. And that rhythm can be several different things. It can be based on my internal hormone cycle, which could be the menstrual cycle. It could be based on the moon or the lunar cycle. It could be based on the seasons or the wheel of the year. And if you don't know what the wheel of the year is, I have a video about that linked below. But more importantly, it doesn't really matter the objective thing that you're cycling to. It is simply the fact that there is rhythm built into your life, that there is a time for rest and a time for doing, a time for outward energy, a time for inward energy. When we're working on having things in our life or consciously creating our dream life or achieving goals or dreams or intentions, there is a way to do that that honors a cycle, right? There's time to set an intention. There's time to act on the intention. There's a time to pause and reflect and see how it's going. Is it still aligned? What's going well? What's holding me back? Like, why can't I seem to be getting where I want to go? What's limiting belief? What are my limiting beliefs or shadows? There's a time to have gratitude and be like, you know, I'm doing a really good job. I want to celebrate my wins, celebrate the things that maybe were best guesses, but just weren't the right mark, but I'm grateful for the lesson. And then how do I want to move forward? What does my next cycle look like, right? This idea that we can then try again in the new cycle, in the new beginning. So that cycle can be used in any way, but when you have something to tie it to that's like grounded in nature, it gives us a sense of stability when a lot of things are very chaotic. So in this upcoming clip, I'm going to share more about why nature is a great guide for us. There's a whole lot of benefits outside cyclic living to connecting to nature, reconnecting to our land, and living a slower paced life. And I wanted to share too that this isn't just about a choice of how to live your life in a slower way. You know, there are very serious health and spiritual and mental, implications to living in a type A hustle culture all the time. It leads to issues with chronic stress and eventually can lead to burnout and some serious symptoms. We know that this type of life can lead to complete nervous system dysregulation, which can affect our sleep, our immune function, inflammation, which is of course tied to many chronic diseases. It is especially sensitive to the cardiovascular, the heart system, which is really prone to inflammation. When we're in that kind of fight or flight state all the time, our heart rates are higher, blood pressure is higher, which can of course lead to further downstream effects in the cardiovascular system and inflammation. It can kind of mess with our mind. So a lot of people report like brain fog, trouble remembering things. And because the reality is we are meant to be in stress response sometimes, but we're meant to come back down into the rest and digest or the parasympathetic nervous system state. And when we're living in this constant stressor, there's constant inundations, whether it's about the world or on social media or like your family obligations and the home obligations and the work, like there's never a time to decompress. We're like always living in this fight or flight state. And that can be really dangerous on the body, and these effects compound each other. So when we can't regulate back down into the parasympathetic, and that's when we see these blood pressure, heart rate issues, the immunity problems, whether it's increased immunity or decreased immunity. We see, again, trouble with sleep and circadian rhythms, so we're getting less sleep or poorer sleep. We see trouble with insulin and sugar regulation in the body, which can, again, lead to things like prediabetes or diabetes. And so it doesn't mean that all of those conditions are caused by nervous system dysregulation or living in a burnout type of world. But certainly if you are working on those conditions and you're living that way, it's not really helping you heal. And so by living more rhythmically, bringing in rest, learning to tune into your body, notice its signals, and allow those signals to be heard and responded to, we can better heal from the conditions that we may be suffering from. So there's a lot of implications to this. And the more you use cyclic living, it may start out with noticing what type of workouts feel good on your body throughout certain parts of the cycle, or what kind of social interaction feels good during certain parts of your cycle. So it might start there where you're kind of scheduling around your cycle a bit more, or if there's something you need to do that seems not with your cycle, like for example, if you have to give a huge presentation, which is during maybe your bleeding phase of your cycle, that may not align because the energy oftentimes during the bleeding phase is not super high and very outward. So giving a huge presentation at work might feel not great. So if you notice that, first of all, you can give yourself some love and appreciation of like, it's not that you're weak. It's not that you're not cutting it. It's just that like that wasn't a great alignment, but that might not have been your fault. So through this work, we actually get a little bit of self-grace and understanding of our body, which is really nice. And we stop shaming ourselves or shoulding ourselves, I call it, into doing things or feeling like less than. We kind of understand ourselves a bit more. So it may start there where you kind of notice there's a misalignment, And if it's something we can't change, like with this work example, it helps us build in more supports into the areas of life that we can control that week to kind of mitigate the fact that that work commitment isn't really aligned. So it kind of starts there, and that might sound really simple, but over time that builds into learning about our energy levels, learning about what's aligned, and it allows our actions to be much more in flow and much more effective if we live this way. However, it goes much farther than that, because the whole basis of cyclic living is tuning into your mind and your body and your spirit. And the more you do that, the more you're going to tune into your intuition, to your inner knowing, to kind of why you're here on this planet, what it is you're meant to be doing in life. And you start to feel a lot different you feel connected to something larger perhaps. And for those who are kind of witchy or spiritual inclined, you can certainly layer on a whole lot of that onto the cyclic living. And so this idea of tuning in starts to trickle out, and the idea of cyclic living trickles out. You start noticing you want to say no to certain things or setting boundaries around certain things. You start to feel like you notice when things are not aligned, and you take small steps to realign. And before you know it, your life is going in a direction that feels much more true to you and authentic to who you are and aligned with your energy and your flow. Another benefit you might see as you are incorporating cyclic living is that some of the defaults that we fall to, like people pleasing, fawning, kind of saying yes because we feel like we should, or doing things because of societal or familial or just external expectations, that starts to feel less aligned. And you start to notice what really is not yours anymore in your life. Like, what are you doing, or what things are part of your life that were maybe never yours to begin with and were kind of layered on by, like I said, society or family or something like that. And so when we tune into our bodies and our minds, it's almost like this, it's like a truth detector. Like, your body and your mind knows what's right for you when you tune in. And I include the mind because the mind, it's not necessarily a bad thing at all. It's quite necessary and really helpful, and can give us a lot of clues into our aligned life when it's used in a way that what thoughts are there to pay attention to, and maybe what thoughts need to just kind of move on with their day. So as we use cyclic living, like I said, it starts to bleed out into how we live our lives in much bigger ways, and people start to make other changes that really had nothing to do with like cyclic living, but there were changes that are helping them live according to their own authentic truth, or live a life that feels more aligned or full of joy or full of magic, right? Because they're noticing when that's not there. They're noticing when their life is feeling very lost in the mundane, or kind of feeling like every day is the same, and that they're living for everyone else, and that there's nothing in their life for them. Like, there's no space on their calendar for them. Like, that's part of cyclic living too, is right, like incorporating things back in that are yours, that bring you joy and pleasure and a sense of like rest and nourishment, right? That's equally part of cyclic living. So it will help infuse your life with those things if it's feeling really devoid of those things right now. So there's really a lot of implications to cyclic living, and it has been a major component of my burnout journey and healing from burnout. And so in this clip, I'll talk a bit more about nature, why she is a wonderful guide for us, all the benefits we can get from her, and why that might be a good fit. And if you're interested after watching that to learn more, I have a cyclic living group that is usually enrolling, but I will have the link below for what's going on right now, depending on when you're watching this. And I do a lot of different work and different workshops that kind of incorporate different kind of parts of cyclic living, but the group offering is kind of like the bigger all-encompassing offer that includes like the full workshop and a group integration process where we can all work together to try to bring this into our life, because this is all a journey. There is no end, or I am now cyclically living. It is all about a constant realignment, a constant tuning in, and a just slow practice of slowly breaking away from that hustle culture if that's something that has felt really misaligned to you. So it's a really beautiful way to slow down, build and rest, and honor both the outward yang, very kind of go get it type energy, as much as we honor the yin, the intuitive, the rest, the tuning in side, right? They're equally and necessary and important. And I think it's about time that we share that with the world and that we honor that and the way it has been honored in a whole lot of other systems throughout the centuries and millennia probably. So yes, I think this is a really beautiful practice. If you're interested to learn more and you're not sure how this might fit in your life or it could be helpful for you, then shoot me an email or message me or comment on here. You can enjoy the clip and then check out any offerings I have below to really dig your teeth in a whole lot deeper into cyclic living and see if it's right for you. Thanks so much for watching. So we're going to move into a little bit about nature being our guide and why should we let nature be our guide? And if you're here, I'm assuming there's not a whole lot of selling I need to do on this, but I wanted to kind of bring up a few reasons that we may consider this. So nature is a prime example that is accessible right outside our door to show us ebb and flow, right? We can easily see outside what's going on. It doesn't take a lot of effort to look out your window. And we can use what we see to find connections within ourselves. Because ultimately, everything on this planet has ebb and flow, right? There are periods where things rest. There are periods where things are active. If you live near where I live, which is in North Carolina in the United States, we do have a winter. And so things will drop their leaves. The roots of the trees will nourish themselves in the winter, right? Things may look dead above ground, but it doesn't mean that there's not activity and things going on below ground. We may have animals slumbering, right? There's things that hibernate or just change how they function, how they find food, what kind of food they're eating, right? Like all of that changes depending on the weather and what's available. And then in the spring, things will bloom, the nourishment that happened in the winter, all of the kind of accepting of things and the rebuilding that occurred in the winter is able to come up into the trunk and bloom in the spring. So we can kind of see these cycles and we can trust, like, yes, everything maybe looks dead right now, but I also know that in the spring things will change. And I know that in the summer it's going to get really hot. And I know that in the fall the leaves will change and they will slowly die off in the winter or into the winter. And we can start to trust that this ebb and flow is normal and that we as humans, as much as we have tried, are not separate from nature. We are not separate from the need to ebb and flow and nourish and have times where we are outward and times where we are inward. And so we can find little moments in nature, little moments of inspiration that can reflect back something in ourselves, because really the ecosystem is mirrored, right? If you're interested in astrology at all or anything, the body is an ecosystem. And I think more and more we are understanding that. And I think people intuitively understand that. Like we tend to, in healthcare, silo parts of our body, whether it's in specialties or what you're treating with a medication. But ultimately, the body is one connected system, and the health of one part impacts the health of the other. So we are not disconnected from the ecosystem of where we live, the spaces that we live, and what is going on in nature. And so we can really see symbols and patterns in nature that reflect on us as humans. And so I think it's a really beautiful way to let nature be our guide. Again, we're seeing rest as necessary and vital and welcomed. Being in nature definitely increases our presence, especially if we're using our senses to see what we see, we hear, we smell, whether you're doing mindfulness work out in nature, just going on a slow walk and looking around, or you're in a park with your family. It's very present because it's very sensory. And that in and of itself is helpful to like bring us back into the moment, where anxiety and depression often doesn't live as much in the present. It lives before or after us. And so by coming into nature and seeing that it's always just in that present moment can really help us return there as well. It promotes our energy conservation, our balance, our harmony, because all of those are key aspects to how the ecosystem in nature works, is having balance and harmony. So we can kind of learn that and take that into our own lives. It helps us feel connected to something larger because nature is so vast that it can help us feel connected to something greater, whether it doesn't have to be religious in any way. It can be if that's something that is meaningful to you, but it could just be simply connecting to the land around you. It gives us an anchor point from which to flow because we have a cycle that we kind of see and we can expect. And when the world is chaos, we have a flow and a rhythm that we know. We know that the moon is going to swell, it is going to get full, and it's going to go back small and then disappear for a little bit and then come back. Like that's going to happen no matter what, unless the whole world ends, right? But as long as that doesn't happen, that should continue to happen. And that can give us a sense of like something to grab onto and a sense of rhythm to tie our lives to. It helps us see there's always a fresh start around the corner. No matter what, spring will come. No matter what, the next new moon will come. We always have a chance every day, every sunrise to live the way we want to live. And we always have the option to make a new choice. And I think that can be really reassuring as well. And again, it gives us this time to rest, to receive, and also to give and to be outward. So again, this kind of yin and yang, this kind of ebb and flow is really something we can connect to outside. And this, if you remember nothing else, is kind of the crux of cyclic living. So by tuning into cycles, we can better inform what we do, how we do it, and when we do it. It promotes self-awareness and tuning in. We can proactively plan our time and our activities to honor how we feel during each part of a cycle rather than flowing against it. We can give ourselves the support we need and be kinder to ourselves in the process. That is cyclic living. It is living aligned to a rhythm. And I'll talk about in a bit, it doesn't have to be something prescribed. Like it doesn't have to be even what I'm telling you today, right? It's simply living to your own rhythm, tuning into your body and what it needs and giving that to it. That is cyclic living, not pushing against it.